Beretta is the oldest manufacturer in the world. Even though we've been talking about this being Browning's special year, their 100th anniversary, for Beretta, 2026 is even bigger as they celebrate 500 years. But here's the thing, back in the 1970s and early 1980s, Beretta weren't the powerhouse that they are in the UK today. The likes of Browning, Winchester, Nico and Miracle absolutely ruled the roost. Beretta weren't really anywhere to be seen apart from maybe their top-end SO competition guns. But back in the late 1970s, Beretta came up with an action design that was going to change the course of their history forever. That was the 680 series action. So fast forward to 2025 and we have got the likes of this. This is a Beretta 687 Silver Pigeon 3 in its most recent format. Without a doubt, one of the most popular guns for both game and clay shooting here in the UK. But how did we get here? So in front of me, I have another Silver Pigeon, but this gun was manufactured back in the 1990s. Now, both these guns have the 680 series action, which for me is the gun that put Beretta on the map and made them what they are today. But what's changed in that period? What are those differences and how do they compare with each other as a gun? Let's find out. If you don't know who I am and you're joining us for the first time, I am Matthew Morgan from the Eastfield Gunroom YouTube channel. We are here today at the fabulous Oakedge Shooting Ground in the Staffordshire countryside. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be putting two Berettas, one from the 1990s and a brand new current version Silver Pigeon through the paces to look at what's changed between these 680 series action guns. This video is proudly sponsored by the British Shooting Show, and if you do like this video, do hit like, do hit subscribe, because we do appreciate your support. Now behind me, we have got a couple of stands. We're going to go and do some shooting. I'm going to try each gun individually, side by side or over and under, and see which comes out on top. So I've just had a few shots with the latest specification 687 Silver Pigeon 3. Now this gun in its first format, if you like, its earliest guys, was launched back in I think about 2002 or 3. And the thing with the Silver Pigeon 3, it's always kind of sat smack bang in the middle of the range. The Silver Pigeon 1 or a basic Silver Pigeon, old 686, you always knew what you were getting. You were getting the reliability of a 680 series action, but it was quite plain, it was quite basic. Whereas the Silver Pigeon 3, they really ramped it up. You've got better wood, better engraving, but let's not forget, if it's a 680, it's gonna work. So let's step back in time now to 1990s and let's have a go with the other one. So just like taking a classic car down the road and having a go in a Jag, we've had a go with the original Silver Pigeon. This is the 687 Silver Pigeon, which was launched from memory about 1994-ish, and it kind of came after the original 687. Stay with me, people. As you can see, there is a few cosmetic differences, but from a bit of distance, you would barely tell the difference between the brand new Silver Pigeon 3 and this classic. So we've shot both of these guns. There are some differences, but I'm going to keep you in suspense a little bit longer. Let's go and shoot some more through both guns, and then we can sit down and look at the finer points of each. So we've been out and we've shot both of these Beretta Silver Pigeons on an absolute scorching day. We're going to have a sit down now, cool off a little bit, and talk about the differences between the guns, both cosmetically in terms of their full specification, but more importantly, how I thought they shot, what my shooting experience of shooting both of the guns was, and who potentially each gun might be suitable for. So kicking off with the 687 Silver Pigeon, which is kind of like the original Silver Pigeon, and this gun was made in the 1990s now. So shooting this gun was really interesting for me because it's got nominal bores, 18.4, and it's got little mobile chokes, which of course is Beretta's traditional short multi-choke, if you like. Moving forward to the current model Silver Pigeon 3, and we've got 18.6 bores, and we've got longer Optima HP chokes. Now, I've got to say, we've got the same chokes in both of these guns. Having shot them, I couldn't really see a massive amount of difference either in terms of the recoil or in terms of the shooting of the gun. Now, I think the reason for that is actually, if we go back in time again to the older Silver Pigeon, it is about 6 ounces heavier than the current model. Now, that comes down to a number of things. It hasn't got a ventilated rib, it's got a solid rib. It's also got a slightly wider rib, so there's a bit more metal going on in terms of the front. In terms of the back end, it's also slightly denser in the wood department, shall we say. So what you've got is you've got an extra 6 ounces, which ultimately probably means, before we have a look at it, that gun is a little bit barrel heavy. So even though you've got the technology technology of the barrels in this latest Silver Pigeon 3. Because of the extra weight of the gun, the actual recoil produced by the standard Silver Pigeon was pretty much the same, if I'm honest. Now, with that extra weight, it meant that for me, the old 687 was a little bit easier to handle. It wasn't quite as whippy in the barrels. And again, this comes down to what you want from a shotgun. If you want something that's fast in the barrels, then you want a little bit of reduced weight up at the front end of the gun. You want a faster swinging gun. So ultimately, if that was a cause of concern for you, if you like, you would go with the more modern gun because it's a little bit lighter. However, if you want to kind of reduce the recoil, weight is the way to do it. Look at an older gun and it will be a little bit smoother to shoot. Now, in terms of the recoil, on the current Silver Pigeon 3, we've got the very famous, you watch the channel all the time, you'll know all about this, Beretta Microcore pad. Now, that is a proper recoil pad, whereas on the old 687 Silver Pigeon, I'm going to call it the original Silver Pigeon, it's a leather-faced piece of Michelin tyre. Now, again, going back to the recoil, I didn't really see a great deal of difference between the two. We shot the same cartridge, we shot the same chokes. From a overall shooting point of view, they were very, very similar, apart from the modern Silver Pigeon being a little bit faster in the barrels. Now, talking about the chokes, because this is an interesting point, people will be going, well, I don't want to buy a 35-year-old, 30-year-old gun because I can't use steel. Well, you can use steel because ultimately both of these shotguns are sporting shotguns. They are designed for clay shooting. We've got a 30-inch 687 Silver Pigeon 3, which is the current model. The older gun is actually 29.5-inch. We'll come on to that shortly. But in terms of steel, if you want to shoot clays and you're worried about the lead ban, with this older Beretta, with the correct chokes fitted, you will be absolutely fine with high performance steel, providing that the barrels are in good condition internally and there's no dents or damage. It really shouldn't be a concern if you're taking up the sport and you're thinking, well, I'd really like a new Silver Pigeon, but I can't afford one. This 25, 30, 40-year-old Silver Pigeon, 686, whatever it is going to be absolutely fine moving forward with the current legislation. So talking of cost, you're probably thinking, well, how much is the new one? How much is the second-hand one? We'll deal with that later on. But first, going back to the absolute bare bones of this gun, these are both 680 series actions. Historically, the 7 in 687 relates to the fact that there's game scene engraving on the action. If we look at the engraving as a whole, what we can see is we can see two completely different styles and manufacturing processes. On the older Silver Pigeon, the original Silver Pigeon, the OSP as I'm going to call it, you can see it's completely different. So I would say it's kind of a mixture of acid etched and rolled on, which is the process they used to use back at Beretta in the 1990s, whereas these days they are at the forefront of laser technology. We've got 3, 4, 5, 55 quad axis lasers that they're using on these guns, and what essentially that does is it does give for a more in-depth engraving style. You get deeper scroll work, you get more refined game scene patterns, but ultimately neither of them are hand engraved and they've both got quite tasteful game scenes. Now the other thing is you'll notice the difference in the colour of the actions. The modern gun has got a like a nitride kind of nickel finish, whereas the original gun I'm pretty sure was brushed, but if you look at it, it's almost like a white appearance as opposed to the slightly flatter nickel finish on the new guns. Again, that is very much personal preferences. If we look at the gun in terms of the rest of the furniture, the top lever, it's just a cosmetic change. It's exactly the same. The barrels are both engine turned. Bear in mind this gun is 30 plus years old. The ejectors are still exactly spring loaded. The barrels are made exactly the same. It's monoblock with molychrome barrels, so they're very, very hard. They're very impervious to rust. They're very, very strong. This gun is 3-inch chambers, as is the modern gun 3-inch chambers. Now, in terms of the barrels, yes, all the modern day sporting guns from Beretta have got ventilated barrels. Older ones didn't have, but Beretta did play around with this. If you go back to like 1987 or something, you can get a 686, 687, 682, certainly all the 682s with ventilated barrels. Having shot both these guns on a very, very hot day, one ventilated, one not, both ventilated top ribs, I couldn't really tell the difference. Yes, you could argue this one was a little bit cooler, but certainly not to the extreme where I wouldn't consider a non-ventilated barrel gun for the likes of a simulated game day or something like that when you're going to be using a lot of cartridges. So woodwork wise, they are different. They have got different dimensions, they have got different finishes, and they have got different checkering. But again, it's just a question of how manufacturing has moved on in the last 30 years, particularly when Beretta are concerned. Now, the original Silver Pigeon, the OSP, okay, very, very flat oil finish. This is before Beretta discovered True Oil, which is that very, very shiny oil that dries like a lacquer. Very shiny, but ultimately it's good in all of the elements. So this was prior to that. So we've got a completely flat oil finish. We have got double point checkering, which again you don't tend to see on many of the Berettas these days. We've moved on to this kind of more funky rounded stuff, which if you're a traditionalist like I am, I actually prefer this. But again, we're talking about little differences that all come down to personal preference at the end of the day. On the newer one, the checkering is just a bit more modern looking. It's got a bit more swirls on it. It's a bit curvier. This would have been laser checkered without a doubt. The original Silver Pigeon, not entirely sure. I don't think it would have been hand done because of course hand checkering is quite an expensive and a laborious task. However, it does appear to have been hand checkered. Talking of checkering, we have got matching checkering on the Silver Pigeon 3. The one thing I would say is, although it's quite grippy, I don't like the roundness of it. The original OSP Silver Pigeon has got a schnabel on it. Again, this is preference. You could change the forend, but from a shooting point of view, I certainly felt more control with the schnabel forend, and I do like to shoot a beaver tail, but this was a better option for me than this. Again, it comes down to how you hold the gun, personal preference, and how big your little mitts are. So grade of the wood, currently if you buy a 687 Silver Pigeon 3, you get what's called, I think, 2.5. You'll see this is a very nicely figured piece. It's got a lot of coloration, it's got a lot of figure, whereas back in the days of the original Silver Pigeon, it was more to do with strength, to be honest, and you'll see that a lot of the guns of this period are very, very straight through the grain, but we all know that straight grain means it's going to be strong, so if you are going to get your hands on a second-hand one, very unlikely to find any defects in kind of the wood department. In terms of dimensions, this is quite critical. Beretta went through a phase, even with their sporting guns in the 80s and into the 90s, of using 38-60, so that's 38mm drop at comb and 60mm drop at heel, and that doesn't fit anybody. Thankfully these days they have learnt their mistakes, and pretty much all of the sporting guns in the Beretta range come 35-55. You may find a slight variation with some of the slightly older guns, sort of 36-56, but we all know in terms of fit, alterations are fairly easy to do, and you would think nothing of an adjustment like an adjustable comb on a modern sporting gun like this, because if anything, it makes it fit more people and adds value in essence. Should just mention, fortunately for this particular OSP, this has got the later dimensions, 35-55, so it's almost like this was a gun from an interesting point of a crossover, of a transition, but we've got 35-55, which probably explains that even though neither of these guns fit me, I have shot them with similar skill. Triggers on these guns are identical. We have got golden triggers. It's a 680 trigger. It's inertia operated. It works. Very rarely will you have a problem with any kind of operation from a 680 series gun, regardless of whether it costs 400 quid or 7 grand for a new WWL. They are very, very good. In terms of the actual cosmetics, the aesthetics, the Silver Pigeon 3 has got a nickel one with some engraving on. On the original Silver Pigeon, we've got matte black trigger guard to match the rest of the furniture, i.e. the top lever, and of course the matte finish on the barrels. Interestingly enough, with the barrels on the older guns, again you get a tram line, no centre bead, and like I said, it's 11mm, which means a millimetre wider than the widest point of this 10x8 tapered rib on the Silver Pigeon 3. So I mentioned that the older Silver Pigeon was 6 ounces heavier than the current model. Basically that comes down to £8 3 ounces versus £7 13 ounces with the current version. Now, even though Beretta have got their fabulous B-Fast balancing system available, sort of 690, 694 DT11, it doesn't come with the Silver Pigeon 3. However, should you want it fitted to the stock, it can be done by a gunsmith. Now, in terms of the balance, the old Silver Pigeon, which I have to say feels lovely to close, is pretty much, it's maybe a very, very, very slight bit barrel heavy, which makes perfect sense because it is heavier overall. Let's not forget that Michelin tyre on the back end is also going to add a bit more weight than the Quaver microcore pad. Silver Pigeon 3 is actually incredibly a little bit barrel heavy. So we talked about the B-Fast system and the possibility of having one fitted by a gunsmith. That might be a good idea in this instance, or add a bit of weight to the back. Other means are available, or a slightly heavier recoil pad. So interestingly enough, the older gun actually balances better out of the box. So one of the best things about the 680 series action is, for the last best part of 40 years, however long it is, since the late 70s up to right till now, is all the parts are interchangeable. So if you're talking about mainsprings, firing pins, ejectors, all those consumable things, right down to barrels, if you've got a gun made in 1979, or if you go and buy one next week, the part will change. Alongside this comes interchangeability, if that's a word. So I could take these barrels off here and put them on here. They will go straight on the action. The only thing you might have a little bit of an issue with is when you kind of fit the fore end iron, that kind of stuff. Sometimes you do a little bit of tweaking by a gunsmith, but in essence, that action and barrel and that action and barrel are exactly the same. Right, bit of nostalgia for you. Who remembers these fantastic blue, genuine Beretta cardboard boxes? Now, this is one of the differences with these guns. However, even if you bought a double ELL back in the 80s and 90s, quite often, or certainly ELs and 682s and things, they came in cardboard boxes. So this is not unusual. It is unusual to find one that's still got its cardboard box because they've usually been lost several house moves ago. Of course, with the current gun, you do get a ABS case, but ultimately, like I said many times, how often do you use an ABS case like this? If you go in abroad, you couldn't use this. It's not Flightline approved, but you do get a set of 5 multi-chokes and a keel. You did originally with both of these guns. And as if by magic, the guns have appeared on top of their boxes. So what about price? This is the key thing. Now, people kind of have this preconception that if I buy a 1980s or a 1990s gun, it's like buying a 1980s or a 1990s car. It is absolute nonsense because, like I've explained, there has been very few changes in terms of the manufacturing, only really in the technology and the processes between these two guns. If you go out and buy a new Silver Pigeon 3, again, we try not to talk about prices on this channel, it is going to cost you at least twice what you're going to pay for a 687 Silver Pigeon, very similar to the one on top of this box. If we go even lower than that, you can pick up a 686 or an old 687 from the 1980s, very, very well made gun, last you a number of years for under 500 quid these days, particularly in the shorter barrels, because let's face it, shorter barrels these days are not as popular as they were back then, particularly for clay shooting. But if you're a shorter person or a female, you want a slightly lighter gun, 28-inch should always be a consideration. And in terms of the steel, even if it's a fixed choke gun at 1.25 and the barrels are all good, you'll be fine. So like I said at the start of the video, back in the 1970s, the roost, if you want to call it that, was definitely not ruled by Beretta in the same way it is today. It was other manufacturers like Miracle, like Nikko, like Winchester. However, with the addition of the 680 series action, everything changed for Beretta. Let's not forget that up until about 2000 and I think it was 14 when they launched the 690 series of guns, their entire portfolio of over and under shotguns up until that point was built on the 680 series action. To summarise in 5 words, there is no bad 690. It's an 80. So to summarise in 5 words, there is no bad 680. It is as simple as that, whether it made in 1982 or you go and buy yourself one next week, it is going to be an excellent gun, and for anybody starting the sport, upgrading, whatever, it should always be on your shopping list. That has been the Beretta Silver Pigeon Shootout with me, Matthew Morgan from Eastfield Gunroom. If you have enjoyed this video, which I hope you have, please do hit like, please do hit subscribe, and don't forget that notification bell. This video is proudly sponsored as ever by the British Shooting Show. If you've got any kind of Beretta questions or anything like that, do feel free to comment below or hit me up with an email, give me a call, you know, the old fashioned phone, whatever you want to do. It's been fantastic to be here at Oakedge Shooting Ground once again, so big thank you to Sue and the team for allowing us once again to come and shoot in this glorious countryside setting. And from me, Matthew Morgan, and the OSP and the SP3, I'll see you next time.